Whirling Maelstrom. It's gonna sever, it's gonna unravel, it's gonna spawn threadlings, it's gonna give you and nearby allies woven mail on kills, and you can produce up to 2 of them every 8 seconds. This involves the Moirai chest piece. This lets our threaded spike melee detonate tangles, as well as create a duplicate tangle that will head towards us and can be caught, then thrown. We also have various artifact perks granting the additional buffs, plus Shackle Grenade and Threaded Specter for some additional survivability. We'll of course be using the Threadrunner subclass with the Silk Strike super, Gambler's Dodge to refund melee on use, Threaded Spike, which will bounce between multiple enemies before returning, and by pressing the melee button when it returns, it can be caught, refunding a bunch of melee energy, Shackle Grenade to suspend and lock down enemies, Whirling Maelstrom. This is what's being super buffed by our exotic and artifact. This turns our tangles into lasting zones of damage that will move and seek out enemies. Threaded Specter, which spawns decoys every time we use our class ability. When destroyed, these decoys will spawn threadlings and deal damage to nearby enemies. Thread of Rebirth, which will allow our Strand weapon final blows to generate threadlings. Thread of Evolution to buff all of our threadlings. Thread of Continuity, which increases the duration of Suspend, Unravel, and Sever. Thread of Generation, which will grant us grenade energy whenever we deal damage. And Thread of Fury, which generates melee energy whenever our tangles damage enemies. For our artifact, we will be using the Tablet of Ruin to shreds, makes it so that anytime we kill a severed enemy, they will spawn a pool that grants woven mail to allies that walk through it. Limit Break, to increase the damage of our super when we have woven mail. Vile Weave, which causes our tangles to sever and reduces the cooldown by 4 seconds every time we pick up a tangle. Horde Shuttle, which causes sustained damage against unraveled enemies to spawn threadlings, and makes all of our threadlings sever targets. Gold from Lead, which will grant extra heavy ammo. Elemental Siphon, which will grant extra super energy when we pick up a tangle. And Unraveling Orbs, which will give our weapons unraveling rounds if we have recently picked up an Orb of Power. For weapons, we're using the Barrow-Dyad as it deals good sustained damage, which will interact well with our artifact perks against unraveled enemies. An Adaptive Frame Sniper Rifle to stun barrier champs and take out faraway enemies. And a High Impact Frame Strand Rocket Launcher so that we can take care of unstoppable champions. For armor stats, we want as close to 100 melee as possible, and after that put everything into class ability and weapons. Currently, I have the Dreambane armor set equipped. This makes it so killing a orange bar or higher ranked enemy will grant unstable essence, increasing our grenade and melee stat bonuses, alongside giving us health on sustained weapon damage. For armor mods, starting with the head, Heavy Ammo Scout, so we can generate heavy ammo for our allies, Hands On for super energy on melee kills, and Harmonic Siphon, so our weapon kills can generate orbs of power. For the gauntlets, we're running 2 focusing strikes to get our class ability back faster, along with heavy-handed to occasionally generate orbs on powered melee kills. For the chest piece, we're running whatever resistance mods fit the activity, alongside a Harmonic Ammo Generator. On the legs, we're running Triple Strand Weapon Surge. On the class item, we're running Time Dilation to increase the duration of our armor charge, Class Font to increase the size of the overshield we'll gain when we dodge, and Reaper, so occasionally after dodging, our weapon final blows will be able to generate an orb of power. The basic loop of this build involves throwing out our melee as often as possible, and dodging as often as possible while shooting everything that moves. Our Whirling Maelstroms and Threadlings will be dealing a lot of extra damage alongside our weapons. Enemies being severed to deal less damage, us having woven mail so we take less damage, alongside threaded specters covering the field to draw enemy fire, will all make it easier to stay alive. I'm going to quickly demonstrate how the Strand melee and exotic work. By pressing the melee button, we will throw out a threaded spike. You'll notice it'll deal extra damage to the first enemy hit, eventually coming back to us. By pressing the melee button again, it is caught, and melee energy is refunded for every enemy hit. If we throw the melee at a tangle, you'll notice that that tangle will detonate, turning into a Whirling Maelstrom, and we will also be able to pick up a tangle in our hands when we catch the melee that returns to us. We can throw that tangle, and damaging enemies with a tangle generates melee energy. We can hit this other tangle that was also generated, catch it, be able to throw again. You'll notice when we generate a tangle, there's a 12-second cooldown. If we pick up a tangle, it drops by 4 seconds. allowing us to generate tingles a lot faster. Finally, the way that this build grants Woven Mail, when you kill a severed target, it'll drop this green pulsing thing on the floor, and you'll notice it'll pulse about 3 times, and if you're inside of it, you get Woven Mail for 10 seconds. If you want to copy my fashion, go ahead and pause here. That's it for the build, so I'll see you in a Grandmaster. I've been thinking a lot about randomness and pattern, specifically how they relate to each other, and also potential ways to quantify them. And you'll usually hear about something like a dice or a deck of cards as random. But I've essentially been asking myself, how random is it? And I'm sure math has answers to all of this stuff, and it's already figured out ways for it, but I kind of enjoy thinking about these problems sometimes and just coming up with whatever kind of my head is able to work out. And what I've come up with is that randomness and pattern should be the inverse of each other. And so, like in the case of percentages, if something is 25% random, then that means it is 75% patterned. As a definition for patterned, it is the degree to which an intelligent guesser, or the accuracy with which an intelligent guesser could predict the next outcome. So something perfectly patterned would be, for example, multiplying by 2. An informed guesser would know what the current number is and could guess with 100% accuracy what that number multiplied by 2 would be. Something that is 100% random means that an informed guesser has no idea what the output value is or could be. If you take a dice, let's do a 4-sided dice because the math's a little bit easier, but it works for a 6-sided dice as well. There are 4 different faces that the dice can come up on. Because of this, an informed guesser, someone who knows that it is a 4-sided dice being rolled, will have a 25% accuracy when it comes to guessing what the next number rolled will be. So in this sense, a perfect 4-sided dice, meaning an equal chance to roll all the sides, is 25% random. Or sorry, I said that wrong. 25% patterned and 75% random. And the interesting thing is, if you take a deck of cards and you were to shuffle that deck and pick a card at random, you would expect to only have a 1 in 52 chance of knowing what card is going to come up next. But if you take into account the mechanics of shuffling and know what shuffle was used, and you know that it was a riffle shuffle, you will actually be able to guess. An informed guesser, meaning someone who knew the order of the cards before the deck was shuffled, would be able to guess the next card to be drawn with a 50% accuracy. This is because the first card drawn has about a 1/2 chance of being the card that was on top before. And if the card that is drawn is some card that can be found partway through the deck, it becomes known sorry, I have to lock in here. If the deck only went through a single riffle shuffle with a single cut, then for the rest of the deck, you are only essentially guessing whether you're counting down from the first cut or the second cut. Or in other words, the top half of the deck or the bottom half of the deck. If the cut happens unevenly, then it is possible for the person guessing to, across the entirety of the deck, guarantee that they will get more than 50% of the cards correct. Like before, assuming a perfect cut, the person would still guess at the start that the card that was on top before is still the card that's on top. If they are correct, then they simply would guess the card that was second when the deck was at its original state, and go on so far, and continue thus until they are wrong. Once the person is wrong, they will then know exactly where in the deck the cut was made. This is once again assuming that the person knew the order of the cards before the shuffle. Once the person knows where the cut was made, they know whether or not which half of the deck from the cut is the larger half, and can then guess, and then can continue to guess, essentially going in order, for values of cards from that larger half of the deck. And once again, you'd go down in order as they appear. Now, if two riffle shuffles are performed, things get a little more complicated, as there are now two cuts of the deck that can be guessed. This would reduce the predictability of the deck down to 1/4 and increase its randomness to that of a 4-sided dice. based on this, there's very few things in the real world that are fully random or fully patterned. And funny enough, that's how a lot of things in the real world, like there's very few absolutes when it comes to things like states of matter or even different like medical conditions and for like mental or physical health. There's kind of these in-between states that people can be in where they have like they match 98% or 90% or 70% with what the condition is defined as. If you have a table, the majority of the interactions that it is going through are best described as what a solid would do. It's just sitting there and rigidly supporting anything that's placed on it. But technically, the table is also acting like a liquid, very slowly and very slightly. Technically, it's acting like a gas, very slowly, very slightly, and both of those to a degree where if you were to try and use the calculations to help with predictions, you'd kind of get immeasurable differences across most scales of time.